With a master's in food business degree from the prestigious Culinary Institute of America, Jason Wallace, a former executive chef restaurateur, is an innovative restaurant operations scientist. Wallace's client list reflects all genres of food service, including startups, quick service, full and limited service restaurants. Wallace's educational seminars for leadership development have been attended by prominent restaurant companies. As a food service educator, Wallace has served as a professor and guest lecturer at the New York Restaurant School, the Art Institute, Hudson and Westchester County Colleges. Wallace has been an active member of the New York State Restaurant Association, which was established in 1935, holding various leadership positions, including treasurer, vice chairman of the board of directors, and in 2010, Wallace became the first African-American chairman of the board for the New York State Restaurant Association.
Yes, welcome to another episode of Hidden Figures, Behind the Numbers with the Restaurant Scientist, and I am the Restaurant Scientist, Jason Wallace. So without any further ado, my guest today, and you know most of the time I'm dealing with independent operators on the independent side. Today, I'm blessed to bring on a franchisee that's killing the game. His name is Brandon Hurst, and he is the franchisee of Chick-fil-A in Brooklyn, New York. Brandon, welcome to the show. As I said before, you know, you're my first franchisee. I've had other corporate executives, other industry leaders in both politics, nonprofit organizations, and independent operators. So we're proud to dive into, you know, the numbers and the statistics and, you know, what does it really take? Because I want to encourage more Black African Americans to explore franchising, right? Franchising as a possibility. Because at the end of the day, my show and myself, the goal is to teach people how to build wealth through restaurant and food service operations. We see it each and every day. And the funny thing is even during the pandemic, when many issues, hidden issues in our industry were exposed, right? But at that point, you still saw more franchises opening, right? They were expanding between 20 and 2021 because, you know, some locations were going out of business, some other independents, and even some of the franchises were downsizing. But the ones that had the systems in play, they used that opportunity to continue to expand the number of units as well as develop their concepts. And I like franchises because ultimately, even with my high-end Culinary Institute of America degrees, plural, right? Yeah. You know, yeah. That was a little drop, like, right? You know, we really want to grow up to be like the franchises, right? You know, ultimately, you know, when I came out of culinary school, I didn't think about, forget about what you think about Red Lobster, right? Or Applebee's or Chili's or even Dunkin' Donuts on the QSR side. You know, it doesn't really matter what you personally think about those operations. But, you know, you start talking about 3,000, 6,000, 9,000 restaurants, units, depending on each brand across the country, they got to be doing something right, right? So it's that type of infrastructure that the Restaurant Scientist brand is built around, right? I build my brand around bringing educational, repeatable strategies and systems from multi-unit operators to independent operators so that they can understand truly, you know, what is EBITDA and how do you build wealth and how do you start with a $3 million operation and you open up a second unit, now you got a $6 million company, right? And a third unit, now you got a $9 million company and brand. Now you're doing, like now if you keep 10% of a $9 million, a $12 million, or, you know, even some of these larger brands is $200, $300 million brands, this is how they do it. Right, this is the science and why this show is called Behind the Numbers. So my job is to expose those numbers and reveal them to the independent operators and the everyday individual entrepreneurs. Say, listen, you too should look at franchising as an opportunity, and if not, that's fine. But look at the systems that they have and they bring to the table, and the education and the repeatable strategies that will allow you really to build growth and not be tied to run one restaurant, or just struggling to, to hit 6% or 7% EBITDA? Like, how do you get to 12%, 13% EBITDA, north of 10%? So having said all of that, I just wanted to lay the foundation for you as well as the viewers and listeners, and then say, okay, Brandon, tell me about how did you build your brand, and how did you select Chick-fil-A, which everyone clearly loves. The lines are tremendous, the volume's crazy, and there's opportunity. And I don't know how many African Americans franchisees there are in the country, but we applaud and we salute you. So tell us how you built it and how you got to this point.
Yeah, man, brother, thank you so much again for the opportunity to be here and just to kind of share my story, my journey. A lot of what you will hear today is based off my own personal experiences. So for the listeners out there, don't get me on the fact checking. I encourage you guys to truly go in and do your own due diligence. Again, I don't speak on behalf of Chick-fil-A, but I can share my own personal experiences for what I do with BJH Hospitality Group Incorporated. And so I got started with Chick-fil-A, man, my sophomore year of college. I graduated from the Alabama State University, which is a historically Black college university in Montgomery, Alabama. And what's ironic about my journey and my story and how I got to Chick-fil-A is, although I'm originally from Atlanta, which is the birthplace of Chick-fil-A, I knew nothing about the brand. I wasn't exposed to it, and when I share that, a lot of people's like, what, man? Atlanta's like the Mecca for Chick-fil-A. And I said, yeah, you're right. But where I grew up and on my side of town, we just got a Chick-fil-A. So that just goes to show you how much growth potential there still is in Atlanta itself. And so, like I said, I got introduced my sophomore year of college. I had a fraternity brother, shout out to the brothers of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. And so I was already in the QSR space, just like any other college part-time student, looking to make ends meet. And my frat brother was like, yo, Brandon, Chick-fil-A across the street is looking for a marketing director role. You should go and apply. And I'm looking at dude like, yo, I am not trying to build a career out of fast food. Like, this is just something, day to day, make ends meet. In fact, I had aspirations of going to law school. I had the whole game plan laid out. I was going to finish business school, graduate, go to law school, then move to New York and work on Wall Street. That was my whole game plan after that. And so he just kept applying the pressure. He was like, yo, go to Chick-fil-A. And I was like, okay, cool. So I ended up going, and what caught me off guard and that really attracted me, they put me through 5 interviews. This particular franchisee had a very robust interview system just to start off as a team member. Now, mind you, I have worked at some of our other competitors and had no problems walking straight into leadership positions. And so that kind of stumped me, but I'm a person that likes challenges. And I said, okay, cool, challenge accepted. And so started working there. And what was so uniquely different was I found myself leaving and I would go home less stressed. The customers were friendlier. Just the environment, something about that culture was different. Yeah, the culture of working in the restaurant was different. So now I'm starting to matriculate through business school. And so here's where the gears really start to take off. 2008, I'm sitting at a leadership conference that was facilitated and sponsored by Chick-fil-A. And I'm sitting on front row, and Dan Cathy at the time was CEO, which we all know, if you do your research, Dan Cathy is the son of the founder of Chick-fil-A. And so I'm sitting on front row, he's going through, giving people high fives. And I'm like, what is happening? Like, something is crazy going on with this culture. And so I go back to my operator, the franchisee at the time. I said, hey, tell me more about like this Chick-fil-A thing. And so he starts doing this. He starts sending me out on grand openings, which is an internal process or program that Chick-fil-A's created. So where every time there's a new restaurant that opens, you as a restaurant employee can go to that market, start training. And so I share that that's important because I'm going to tie that in later into the story. So I get an opportunity to go to Chicago. Chicago back then was a brand new market. There were no Chick-fil-A's whatsoever, very similar to what we're doing today in New York. And I get there. When I tell you, I had never seen anything like it. The lines were long. It was like the Disney World of chicken sandwiches. I mean, people were waiting hours and hours to get this chicken sandwich. And I'm like, what is happening? But I think the thing that came out of that experience was I actually met a brother who's today my mentor. And by the name of Travell Harvey, he's a very successful franchisee in the DC, Maryland area. And so at the time he was working on corporate side, and he sits me down. He was like, Brandon, what's next? So I told you guys, I'm matriculating through business school. I would lead production management class, walk into the restaurant. My boss would say, hey, today you're doing inventory. And I'm like, what? Oh, I just learned that in class. So that was a very unique experience. So Travell sits me down. He's like, all right, what's next? I'm telling him the same story. Dude, I'm getting ready to apply for law school. Like, I got blinders on. It's like, I don't see a career in this QSR space. And so he sits back and he says, man, you really should take a deeper look into Chick-fil-A, because I think you're really good at this and you could go far. And for the first time, that was really my first introduction to what could be beyond the four walls of the restaurant. And so we started having conversation. And by the end of the conversation, he was making a job offer. He said, hey, I'm going to be in Chicago for a little while. When you finish school, why don't you move to Chicago, work under my leadership, and see where it takes you from there. And so here's where the game starts to change. I go back to Alabama because I'm still in school. I'm still traveling across the country, working on my bachelor's program, and still doing all of these things with Chick-fil-A. And I go back to campus. I'm now a senior getting ready to graduate. And my freshman professor stops me walking across the yard, Dr. Shirley Jordan. I'll never forget her. And I hear this voice, Brandon. And she was like, baby, you just been on my mind a lot lately. She reaches in her purse, hands me this book called Taking the Risk by Dr. Ben Carson. And what was so unique about reading that book was oftentimes when we're assessing risk, we think about what's the worst that can happen versus what's the best that can happen. And so here I am, I'm at a fork in the road because I had just got that offer from Chicago. Alabama State had just offered to pay for my master's in accounting. And there was still this lifelong dream of law school. I want to go to law school. And so after reading that book, my heart was saying, you love Chick-fil-A. There's something that's unique about this company, right? You're young enough. I started laying out all the options. I talked to my advisors, talked to friends, family, mentors, and I said, here are the three different options. And so by the time I got done just looking and assessing what those options were, I made the decision to take a $12 an hour job, pack everything that I own, move 14 hours away from the South to start a brand new life in Chicago. So talk about making a crazy decision. Like, who turns down a free master?
Absolutely.
This guy. I remember my college professor, my academic advisor, she laughed at me, man. She was like, dude, are you serious? Like, you're about to go in fast food, right? I mean, at the time, there weren't a whole lot of business schools that were teaching entrepreneurship, right? They often teach you, here's how you climb the corporate ladder, or why don't you go be a consultant at one of the big four accounting firms, but there was just something uniquely different about pursuing this opportunity with Chick-fil-A. And I'm glad that I did, because I get to Chicago and it was the best, worst case decision I've ever could have made. So I spent almost 2 years in the Chicago market, helping to open up that market. I'm talking about working in a market where people didn't know how to pronounce the name. They weren't familiar with our product. Just how do we infuse this Southern hospitality in the Midwest? And I learned so much about myself. And what it really took, I had an operator, franchisee, Kevin Bowman, that was very gracious enough to allow me to utilize his restaurant as my own laboratory. And I think that's so important because I'm in my early 20s, fresh out of undergrad. And here this franchisee, I am making decisions for his multi-million-dollar business as a young 20-something-year-old. And there were a lot of mistakes that were made, and we had some great wins and some successes, but I think the experience that I brought out of that was so invaluable because I attribute that to the level of success that I have today. I had an opportunity to essentially launch a popular brand in a brand new market. And how do you do that? And that was the cornerstone of where I am today, brother.
Yeah.
I had one of the highest grossing restaurants in Chick-fil-A's portfolio. We're the first and only ones in Brooklyn.
Man.
And I just attribute a lot of what I went through in my earlier 20s and the experiences that I was exposed to the level of success that we have today. So I'll wrap up and finish the story. So not only am I in Chicago making dumb decisions for this franchisee.
Our decisions.
Yeah. And I think that's important because I share that with a lot of youth today. It's so important to be able to learn under someone else's guide. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's you can't change it and put a price tag on that experience because it will save you a lot of financial pain in the long run. And so I still completed my MBA while I was there. Brother was working. I was working 80 hours a week and still doing an MBA program. And then there came a time I hit a burnout phase. And so I called a mentor again and I said, hey, I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm in the restaurant. I'm getting burnt out. I'm a couple of semesters away from completing my MBA with a concentration in finance. I said, are there any opportunities for me to come to Chick-fil-A corporate in Atlanta? So I fly down to Atlanta. They interview me for accounting position. And so by this time, the career plan had shifted. I said, okay, maybe I can come in, be an accountant, financial consultant, business consultant. Shoot, maybe I can be president of the company one day. Right.
Absolutely.
And so I was very ambitious. I had high aspirations. And so I get down to the interview. By the time I get done, they say, nope, we don't see you sitting at a desk crunching numbers. We think you would be bored. You have too much field experience. And here's the catch. This was another brother that ushered me personally into this leadership development program.
Man.
And he said, I don't think being an accountant is for you. I think your future is brighter than that. And so he personally walks me down the hall to what would then later become my bosses, who were responsible for leading this brand new leadership development program. And so I sit down, talk to them, share my journey, share my passion for Chick-fil-A. And they said, okay, we have one condition. We think you'll be a good fit for our program, but you got to finish your MBA program because as intense as this leadership development program is, we don't think you'll be able to do both. And I said, I hear you on that. Completed my MBA. And in 2012, that's when I officially joined Chick-fil-A's leadership development program. And so for almost 3 years, I had an opportunity to travel across the country, partnering with franchise owners to help them launch their businesses from West Coast, East Coast, North, South, you name it, wherever there was a brand new Chick-fil-A restaurant opening up, either myself or someone from my team would be there to help support in the field those local franchisees. Talking about another valuable experience. You can't put a price tag on that.
Not at all.
But not to mention, I get paid to do it.
Yeah.
I encountered a lot of my first through Chick-fil-A. First time on a plane, first time seeing different parts of the country. A lot of my first were experienced through this leadership development program. And so about halfway through the program, I get a call from my boss, a Black woman who says, Brandon, do you know that Chick-fil-A eventually is going to go to New York? And I said, what is happening here? What's happening? Because mind you, I told you, I started my original career aspirations of ultimately wanting to be in the city of New York if I were practicing law. And so I'm driving down the highway and I pull over because I'm overwhelmed with excitement. And I'm like, God, is this you saying I still may get to live my dreams of being in New York, but I just may be selling chicken and not practicing law.
Absolutely.
And so that's what I did, brother. After that, I started spending all of my time on the East Coast. Every weekend, I was coming up to New York. I had joined the Manhattan Chamber of Commerce. And this was well before we were even in the market. I was that crazy kid stopping people at Bryant Park, doing my own customer surveys, all in hopes of just trying to understand the consumer market here.
Yeah.
I had never visited New York. I was sleeping on people's couches, just all to be here, to truly immerse myself in a city that I said I wanted to live in. And fast forward, I'm now 26 years old. I started going through tons of interviews. The selection process to become a franchisee for Chick-fil-A is highly selective. I think statistics, I was reading somewhere, you have a better chance at getting into Harvard than you do becoming a selected franchisee for Chick-fil-A.
Wow.
Yeah. And so here I am, 26, asking to open up one of their biggest restaurant in their portfolio, right? 26. And so I'm going through tons of interviews, interviewing with their franchise selection team, like executives of the company. And it boils down to, man, Brandon, you have a lot of passion. Clearly you're knowledgeable, but we don't know if we can quite take that risk on you when we haven't seen you truly make decisions as a business owner. So guess what I did? I said, sign me up, make me a business owner somewhere. And that's actually how I got selected at the age of 26 to open my first franchise in downtown Baltimore. And that was unheard of. It was Baltimore City's first inner city location in line. And what was so interesting about the opportunity and unique, I was very clear and vocal about Chick-fil-A, true Chick-fil-A, in terms of the type of model that I wanted, where I wanted to be, and how I thought us coming together could be a great partnership for the long term. I knew that entering into brand new markets, we were going to discover and come across a lot of learnings, right? If you really do your history and homework on Chick-fil-A, our business model, our bread and butter is on freestanding restaurants where you go, you have the drive-thrus, right? It's fast service. And that just wasn't an inline, a concept that I was asking for. It was new to us. It was new. And some people, when they hear new opportunities, they're like, oh no, I don't want to take that risk. I don't want to take that chance. But me, I was like, no, that's a great, I think that's going to be a great opportunity. It's new. And
clarify, let me just clarify inline, because for those that don't understand what that means.
So
on the real estate side. Yeah.
So an inline restaurant is essentially a building that is not a standalone. So think about your storefront retailers, right? If you're in New York, you don't have like a standalone end cap with a drive-through and it sits on its own parcel of land. You're sharing essentially what I call a retail island, and you're attached to several different other buildings. And so if you've ever had an opportunity to visit my restaurant in Brooklyn, located directly across from the Barclays Center, you understand we're a storefront. 100% of our business is all foot traffic. You have to get out of your car, come inside of the restaurant, or you're walking. Tons of pedestrians.
Which is different, but just so that people understand. So when we look at revenue streams in the restaurant industry, we look at two things. Like he said, he doesn't have any drive-through. So drive-through is a revenue stream, right? And then clearly driving in and picking up is another revenue stream. So he's confined to just people actually literally, like you said, getting out of his car and walking into the facility or Uber or, Subway.
And in most cases, for the restaurant, QSR space, not having a drive-through could be very limiting.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I looked at that, I understood that all at the same time while trying to assess this business opportunity, because I still have to do my own due diligence, right? And so I said, okay, this is for me. And so I spent about almost 5 years owning and operating my franchise in Baltimore before relocating and opening across from the Barclays in September 2019. And so it's been an unbelievable journey, my brother. And I'm grateful for it. And I'm always willing to share the journey, again, my own personal experiences about just the process.
Yep. Which is important. The important thing that you had mentors, you had people that were exposing you to the next steps. And then you were willing to not just put a value on the monetary pay, right? And that's a lot of time that's what holds people back. I want to make 80 grand. I want to make $100,000. I want to make,
Mhm.
you know, six figures. But if you have a $30,000 a year job, but you're getting $70,000 worth of actual real entrepreneurial experience and making those mistakes and seeing how to correct them, you learn more from mistakes that are made than from successes. You have to put a value on it. Those intangible things are incredible. And
Yeah.
I applaud you, man. I have much respect. Awesome story.
Thank you so much, brother.
Awesome journey. So, all right. So now you're in Brooklyn. So
Mhm.
talk to me about did you find the lease? Did you find the location? Is there a leasing team? What
Mhm.
about capital? You know, were you required to come up with X amount of capital? Was it debt? Was it equity? Like, give us an idea of
Yeah.
what that was like and how long that process took.
Yeah, that's very good. Very good question. So again, disclaimer, I tell everyone, please go and do your own research. This is not me speaking on behalf of Chick-fil-A. This is just me personally sharing my own personal experiences. So what the business opportunity is, Chick-fil-A does a phenomenal, this is why I love buying into franchisees, because it's a system. It's something, a true working business model, right? I'm not the creator. I'm not the inventor. That's not my skill. My skill set is leadership, people development, and operations, right? And so I try to play to those three key strengths. And so with Chick-fil-A, they have a whole team of experts behind them, from real estate to doing their due diligence about market analysis. And so what you do and what they ask for is they want your human capital experience, right? They want your leadership ability. And so that's one of the reasons why our franchise fee today is extremely low. If you do research at Chick-fil-A.com on the franchisee website, you'll see that our franchise fee is only $10,000, right? And so, and I think the reason why Truett came up with this model, Truett being the founder, is because he knew and realized back then how high the barriers to entry were. And he realized that that system discounted a lot of good, genuine people who had skill set, right? But didn't necessarily have access to that capital. And so I think about my own experience. I just told you I opened my first franchise when I was 26.
Right.
Today, most franchisee systems require you to have $500,000 in liquidity.
Yeah.
Right. At 26, where do I get that? You know, I'm not a trust fund baby. I didn't come from that lineage. And so I am so grateful for our business model, which I think is one of the reasons why we also have a lot of expression of interest. I think I was reading somewhere statistically that we get today around 100,000 inquiries or expression of interest for a Chick-fil-A franchisee. And their team really has to dwindle that number down because we're only opening an average of 120, 130 restaurants per year. And so you can do the math on that. It's highly selective. It's highly competitive. And so when it came time for us to look at Brooklyn, I think I had a lot of advantages already on my side. One, I was already in the system as a franchisee, but two, I was already operating a business model that no one else really cared to venture much into, right? And let alone venture into that model in a market where the costs are 5, 6, 7 times what it would take around the rest of the average. But again, I'm ambitious and I'm like, I'm your guy. I'll go, right? Taking the risk. It goes back to what Dr. Van Carson was saying, man. And so when I found out that they were looking at opportunities in Brooklyn, I started to throw my name in the hat. I said, this is it. This is the opportunity. And again, I think what was advantageous about that, we had a lot of people. There were people who, to be quite honest, I think were scared of taking on the risk. Right? It's expensive in New York. From the rent package to how you do business, the cost of labor, cost of food, all of those different things play into my decision to come here, but that also opened up that window of opportunity. You often hear people say, travel the road that's less traveled because it's not as packed.
Right.
And that's exactly what I did. And so once we found out that that location right on the corner of Flatbush and Atlantic Avenue was a shoe-in, man, I brought my family up. I said, if this is the opportunity, this is what we're going to go for. And so at the time, my mom and stepdad were in the business and my aunt. So I brought them into the business because I knew I needed to create a support team in order, of trust to be able to get this opportunity up here in Brooklyn. And so that's what it is. Chick-fil-A has a very robust system of a team of experts. And once you get through the selection process, you kind of tell them the general regional area that you want to be in. And then that opens up the doors of conversation around specific locations.
Yep. Now, let me point out a few things to the listeners is that he said leadership, right? His job, his vision, his main objective is to be a leader, not a manager, right? So for those that also understand the difference between independent operators and franchises, the first thing you got to do is understand and buy into the philosophy, right? Mm-hmm. The philosophy is this, and you can't fake the funk on it because that's why they put you through so many interviews to figure out if you really just walking, bullshitting, basically, right? I was trying to find another way to say it because you have to drink the Kool-Aid, period. If you want, like, franchising is about believing 1,000% into the systems that they're going to give you, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to buy into the system, which is ultimately, to me, the philosophy. The next thing is you got a leader. You got to be a leader, right? The ability to understand human capital, because now his job is to build the team, right? Not necessarily to run the store. The job of the leader is to build the team, long-term strategic planning, building that team and that infrastructure so that we can grow, so that we do have enough human capital, which is the most valuable asset that's not on your balance sheet. Balance sheet, assets, liabilities, owner's equity, right? Mm-hmm. Revenues and expenses are temporary accounts in the accounting world. Under assets, there's short-term and long-term assets, cash, marketable securities, inventory, prepaid rent. Mm-hmm. All of those things are assets. What's not on that balance sheet is the people who are going to be washing the dishes, cooking the chicken, serving the customers, cleaning the facility. Yeah. Right? That's human capital. Yes. And if you don't put that as a priority, it's impossible to run any restaurant. Yeah. Let alone a franchise.
Man, Jason, I think you hit the nail on the head, because oftentimes coming into conversations with other restaurateurs, that is the number one thing that I think hinders us from scaling, right? Yep. We can cross the T's and dot the I's on every other metric, right, that you just rattled off. But when it comes to your ability to lead teams, that's where it separates good and a high level of excellence, which ultimately will give you that opportunity to scale. Yep. I think I've heard statistics of the ratio. Owning one Chick-fil-A is like the equivalence of owning 3 McDonald's restaurants. So think about, that's 3 times the headache. That's 3 times the people force. That's 3 times equipment management. That's 3 times facility issues. It's all of those different things. And if you're not someone, I won't even go down that line. What I will say is what's most important about that is, from a leadership perspective, it's important for you to be someone who can, one, get others to buy into you and your philosophy of leadership, and understand that it's no longer about your individual performance.
Nope.
It's team. It's always team. I always tell my leaders that within my own organization. Yep. I said, the moment that you put on a shirt and you become a leader in my organization, I no longer measure your success based on your individual contribution. I measure your success based off of how well you're able to accomplish results through other people. Yep. And that's it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Team building. Mm-hmm. The restaurant industry, and I got a sports background. I played every sport growing up in elementary school and high school. Baseball, basketball, football. So I bring that team and that sport mentality to the restaurant industry. And it's a parallel every day that I see that if I'm not building a team, one, if I'm not inspiring, right? Motivation is what makes you take action. It's my job to inspire you. But the first thing I have to do is tell you my philosophy, right? So philosophy is, we are Chick-fil-A. This is no room for your interpretation of what you think about our chicken, how it should be, how you want to cook it, how you want to hold it, how you want to serve it. This is not the environment for that. And if that's where you want to be, then you need to start your own Chick-fil-A B or Chick-fil-B or whatever. I don't know, filet, whatever the case may be. That's not it. So now the job becomes, how do I recruit, hire, right? Recruit, select, train, hire, and retrain those individuals that understand that philosophy and wants to drink that Kool-Aid each and every day and recruit and other individuals and get the best out of them. Elite. Yeah. Right? You want to be elite, or do you want to be just good?
I think there's a lot of misconception about buying into franchise systems in general, right? I was having a conversation last night with the individual, and she was telling me, oh, I don't like Chick-fil-A because of X, Y, and Z. And I heard this, and I said, unfortunately, that's why some of us in our community, we miss out on opportunities because we don't go and do our own due diligence. We out here taking words from the streets. And, you know, he say, she say, the versus, hey, what's factual about that?
Right.
And I've heard something from, oh, you don't get to control the decisions that you make. I said, where are you guys hearing this from? Right. This is a business partnership. One of the things that I love about our business model is Truett always said, hey, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. And it comes with a strong support system. So case in point, if I was opening Brandon's Rib Shack, right? And I needed help to bring in experts to tell me how to grow my marketing and how to lower my costs and my expenses. Think about, I got to go and first I got to find those individual experts, but then I got to pay those individual experts. Within the franchise system with Chick-fil-A, because of how our structure and our system is done, I already get access into that network. And I can spend more time casting vision, growing my business locally versus trying to figure out what different networks that I need to tap into. And most people don't think about franchising as a form of entrepreneurship. I still have a P&L that I'm responsible for. I still have a team that I have to train, hire, select, and develop, right? I still have expenses, day-to-day expenses that I have to pay for. I still provide jobs for the community. By the way, I have 150 team members, staff that work for me. And so when you start to take those different things into consideration, tell me how does that not sound like an entrepreneurship opportunity?
Exactly. You're building a team. So you got 150 employees. Wow. That's impressive. Now, I've also heard, he say, she say, that you can only own and operate one franchisee. As a franchisee, you can only have one store. Is that true?
Here's what I would say the deal is. When you are signing your franchise agreement, the deal is you get one restaurant and you maximize your opportunity on that one restaurant. But there's also, you continue to read the fine print, they also want people that have a high level of entrepreneurial spirit. And so you can have multiple locations. Now, there are restrictions on where those locations are and the number of locations that you can have, but you're not restricted to one location. But we do a really good job at, it's all about brand protection. It's all about building the brand that people have so come to love and endear. And I firmly believe with any endeavor, right? You got to keep the main thing the main thing. Once you are able to prove a system of replication, of excellence, that's when you can start to think about scalability and growing that, which is why we're so methodical in growing.
Yeah. Nah, why would I let you run two restaurants until you've proven that you can actually run one restaurant at the elite level, right? So that's where people kind of get in a situation where even with Amazon. So I have an Amazon business, and 95% is not good enough in the Amazon world, right? And it makes me uncomfortable. I'm like, man, you would think that if I got 95%, that would be good. The goal is 100.
Yeah.
Right? The goal is 100% customer satisfaction, right? We could live with 98, 95, 93, but that's not the goal. And again, if you as an operator, if your philosophy is very clear to your employees, the goal is 100% satisfaction, customer satisfaction, 100% time and temperatures on all of our safety and sanitation issues, 100% on our facilities, the walls, the floors, the plumbing, the electrical, right? All of those other components that come with actually operating a facility.
Yeah.
And when people are put in a situation where it's like, well, man, I got a 90. It was like, well, that's not good.
That's not good enough. Yeah.
Because I want you to be elite and you don't want to be elite.
Yeah.
And I'm comfortable in those situations where they make me uncomfortable with not being elite.
Yeah.
And that's a different mentality for those of us that really strive for 100% process improvement, Six Sigma, whatever, however you are, agile thinking, or whatever you want to think about it or describe it or define it. The goal is always to be better today than I was yesterday.
Yep. Two things that I heard you say, or one is a question and one is a follow-up. So have you ever wondered why the A in Chick-fil-A is capitalized?
Now that you say it, is it because of letter grading?
It's because of our standards and what we strive to be for a brand. We create a brand.
Yeah.
That's who we are. That's what we want to be. That's what we strive for.
Right. We don't want to be A minus.
Yep.
We don't want to be B plus.
No. We are a grade A brand. That is why the A is capitalized in our name. And you mentioned something earlier about what happened in the midst of the pandemic, right? And this goes back to why I think some restaurants didn't have enough to sustain and why you saw most franchise restaurants hit a growth stage during the midst of the pandemic. It's because of brand trust, right? So when people in a time where there's a whole lot of uncertainty, people are always going to go back to what they know and what they trust.
Absolutely. That makes sense. Yep.
Think about that.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt about that. Wow. So we have about 10 more minutes before we wrap up. Let's talk a little bit about numbers. I know you can't divulge all your trade secrets, but people at the end of the day, people kind of want to know how, what's the average unit store volume?
Yeah.
And how much did it cost actually to start? Are there any other requirements in terms of the financing? If it's selected, can you just dive a little bit into those numbers?
So I think the average volume restaurant is somewhere near 8.5 million per volume restaurant. Again, you can find out more information at Chick-fil-A.com to get those specific numbers. And also for those that are interested, once you get through the process, and this is for any franchise system, always ask for a FDD, a franchisee disclosure document. And so that is where you will find a lot of those specific numbers in terms of average volume, sales, and all of those different things. And for me, particularly, I mentioned earlier, there's only a $10,000 franchise fee. That's what you pay. But we actually look for a lot more in terms of financial stability. It's not a specific number. If I had to base off of my own personal experience with any job opportunity or with any entrepreneur opportunity, what you have to ask yourself is, do I have 12 to 18 months of livable expenses saved up in addition to cover my initial startup costs, right? And that's why I said it's not a specific number, but we do look at how you make financial decisions.
Right.
That's what it boils down to.
Right.
We do a really good job in digging deeper into the type of decisions that you've made financially in the past, why you make certain decisions, I give you case in point from my own personal experience. The first time, and I'm not ashamed to say this, but the first time that I started to truly understand the difference between like good debt and consumer debt was when I was going through the selection process, right? Think about it. I was early 20s, and what do we do when we first graduate high school and we turn 18? We start applying for all of the different credit cards and all of those different things. And when I got into the selection interview process and they started to go back and look at some of the history, it was more of, hey, tell me why. Help me to understand what made you make that type of decision, right? It wasn't necessarily about, oh, I see you have X amount in a credit score. They want to know, talk to me about your thought process.
Right.
And that's what a lot of us in our community, we don't talk enough about is thought process and why we make the type of decisions. And so just to wrap up and go back to answering your question, right? Average volume restaurant, again, today, I think is around $8.5 million per restaurant, and $10,000 franchise fee. But you also need to have your own equity in a sense of sustainable resources, right? Because we look at more than you. I think it's highly unlikely for you to just approach Chick-fil-A for a business opportunity and all you have is the cost of the franchise fee.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're not truly thinking and assessing the entrepreneurial risk in the opportunity. Because that's the other caveat. People think that just because you open a Chick-fil-A or you buy into a well-known brand, that you're going to be successful right out the gate. That's not always the case. And so it goes back to my earlier point. Do you have 12, 18 months of living expenses set aside so that you can be able to, like cushion that in case it doesn't?
Yeah.
So from a capital perspective, the way that our business model works is Chick-fil-A is responsible. And again, which is one of the reasons why I love it, because they put a lot of skin in the game, right? And you remember earlier I told you what they want from you is your human capital experience, right? It's not necessarily about the financial means. Although that's important, right? You have to, let's not mistake that. You have to know how to run a business, right? Because in that agreement, what you're signing up and getting in partnership is that you're going to do everything to maximize the success and profitability of this business.
Right.
And so I have to take in consideration the average build out of a restaurant is multi-millions of dollars.
Absolutely.
And Chick-fil-A is putting all of that on the line in exchange for my $10,000 and my business expertise that I bring to the table in terms of locally being in that market, understanding market conditions, and building my own team to meet said market conditions.
Right. Got you. No, absolutely. You can't beat that model, man. I love it. Yeah. I'm glad you're educating me. You're educating my listeners. And for those that, are in the New York City market, go to the Chick-fil-A. What's the address?
It's 166 Flatbush Avenue. Again, you can't miss us, dude. We're right across from the Barclays Center.
Go to the Chick-fil-A. Know that is, especially for those that want to support Black-owned businesses. You got a brother that's the owner operator of that Chick-fil-A, and let's give them some support. Let's give them our love, and let's give them our well wishes. And Brandon, man, I don't even know. You're so impressive, brother. You're so
man.
And
thank you so much.
You're proud. You gave me goosebumps telling your story. The value and the knowledge that you shared, your journey is incredibly impressive.
Thank you, brother.
I want to thank you. Any last departing words of wisdom or things?
Absolutely.
Wrap up.
Yeah. First, I want to say, brother, thank you. Thank you for your platform. Thank you for your influence. Thank you for this opportunity and the opportunities that you give so many others to be an inspiration and have positive impact and influence on our communities. So hats off to you, brother, so much.
Thank you.
I think for our listeners out there, take the risk. We talk about it all the time. Entrepreneurship is how you define taking a calculated risk, right? You got to give a little to take a little.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you again, brother, for coming on. We'll be in touch. You know, we got some other things we need to talk about. And, you know, maybe there's other franchisees that you can plug me in contact with. I could bring them on the show as well, and they could tell their journey. But we really want people to start thinking about franchising as an opportunity. Even those of us that have higher end culinary backgrounds, we're talking about building wealth. I'm the restaurant scientist. I'm talking about behind the numbers. And my job is to hopefully inspire and educate those individuals that may be overlooking these other lanes, which I love about the restaurant and food service industry is it's so many different lanes. And I think this is a lane that has gone too far, ignored, and undervalued. So, Brandon, thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
I want to thank my listeners. I want to thank my sponsors, Cornerstone Business Labs, Cornerstone Production, and Cornerstone Media. Until we meet again, my name is Jason Wallace, and I am the Restaurant Scientist. Peace.